So tonight we're going to go over the heart, and the heart is a four-chambered organ. It has two upper chambers called atria. You can look inside. Each atria is called an atrium. So here is an atrium and here is an atrium. Have the right atrium on the right side, the left atrium on the left side, and then we have the lower chambers are called ventricles. And we have the right and left ventricles, and they are separated by this large mass or wall of tissue called the intraventricular septum. All right, so first we're going to look at how blood arrives to the heart. And the blood will arrive from the body to the heart through two main vessels. We have the inferior vena cava, sometimes called the inferior vena cava, and that's going to be bringing blood from the lower part of the body. And then we have the superior vena cava, and both of which will empty into the right atrium.
Okay, right and left atrium, right and left ventricle.
So our right atrium is on this side, and our left atrium is on this side. Our right ventricle is right here. On the surface of each atrium, we have something called an auricle, and that's this little flap right here. An anatomist thought it looked like an ear, so they called it an auricle. So we have the right auricle and the left auricle, and these are associated with the right and left atria, respectively.
Tricuspid and bicuspid valves.
So between each atrium and ventricle, we have a valve. And because blood will flow first into the atrium and then to the ventricle, we want to prevent the backflow of blood back into the atrium. So we have these valves, these atrioventricular valves, and the one between the right atrium and right ventricle is called the tricuspid valve because it has three cusps. The one between the left atrium and ventricle is called the bicuspid valve because it has two cusps, and is sometimes known as the mitral valve because it looks like a bishop's mitre or the two-cusped hat that bishops sometimes wear.
Chordae Tendineae.
So the Chordae Tendineae are these little guy wire looking things, and these individual Chordae Tendineae are what anchor the valve to these muscles here called papillary muscles. But the valves, or I should say the Chordae Tendineae, will prevent the valves from backflowing all the way up through the space here, or I should say the passageway between the atrium and the ventricle, and that just prevents blood from pushing the valve all the way up through. So when it closes, it's held in place by these Chordae Tendineae, and it can't blow back into the atrium.
Aortic valve.
So the aortic valve is going to be this valve right here, and it's basically the valve between the left ventricle, which will then pump blood into this giant vessel here called the aorta. And this valve is what we call a semilunar valve. It is one of two semilunar valves, and it's going to prevent the backflow of blood from the aorta back into the left ventricle.
Pulmonary valve and pulmonary trunk.
The pulmonary valve is right here. It is one of our other semilunar valves, and it's going to be the valve between the right ventricle, which will pump blood into the pulmonary trunk, which is this part right here. And this is what's going to send deoxygenated blood to the lungs to be reoxygenated.
Right and left pulmonary arteries.
So our right and left pulmonary arteries are going to be the route by which blood gets to the lungs from the heart. So here we have our right pulmonary artery, and here we have our left pulmonary artery. And unlike elsewhere in the body where arteries are red and veins are blue, in this case we have the arteries are blue because they're taking deoxygenated blood that has returned from the systemic circulation to the heart. It's going to be taking that deoxygenated blood and pumping it to the lungs where it will be reoxygenated.
Right and left pulmonary veins.
Pulmonary veins, which are going to be bringing blood that's been oxygenated back from the lungs to the heart. And so both of these are going to empty into the left atrium. So here we have the left pulmonary veins right here, emptying into the left atrium, and then on this side we have the right pulmonary veins, and you can see inside where they're emptying into the left atrium. So the left atrium will be receiving the blood returning from the lungs.
All right, coronary arteries, coronary veins, coronary sinus.
So the coronary arteries basically are the arteries that service the heart. So here's one of our main ones coming off of our aorta here. This is a coronary artery. This is a coronary artery. Here's a coronary artery. And you can see them on the back side as well. The coronary veins are the blue ones. Coronary sinus is this large sort of venous sinus in the back of the heart here. So this is the coronary sinus, and all of these are coronary veins, these blue ones.
Ascending aorta.
So the ascending aorta will be receiving blood from the left ventricle. So the left ventricle will pump blood into the ascending aorta, which is the ascending part of the aorta right here. That will in turn and become the aortic arch. So the arched part of the aorta is called the aortic arch, and then that will turn and descend and become the descending thoracic aorta.
Brachiocephalic artery.
So the brachiocephalic artery, often called the brachiocephalic trunk, will give rise to the right subclavian and right common carotid arteries. And since it's brachiocephalic, it serves both the arm and the neck head region. So that's why it's brachiocephalic trunk.
Okay, left common carotid artery.
The left common carotid artery is right here, and that's going to be bringing blood up to the neck and the head region.
Left subclavian artery.
And the left subclavian artery is here, and as the name implies, subclavian means under the clavicle. So the subclavian artery will run under the clavicle.
Descending thoracic aorta.
So the descending thoracic aorta we just did, that's this part of the aorta that is the part where once the aortic arch has turned, it becomes the descending thoracic aorta.
Intra-Intraventricular Septum.
The intraventricular septum is that wall of myocardium or tissue between the right and left atria.
Myocardium.
The myocardium is the muscle of the heart. So the myocardium, most of the heart is made of myocardium. Now we have other tissues as well. We have connective tissues in the heart. We have neural tissue in the heart. We have the pericardium that we've discussed before and we'll see again in more detail. But most of the heart is made of very specialized muscle tissue called myocardium, and we will see it on the muscle tissue slide, or we will see the cell types that make up the myocardium, and these are called cardiocytes.